this video we're going to show you how to trim the bottom of your pots. So there's two ways in which you can trim. You can trim on the wheel itself, or we have a standing wheel set up for trimming. The standing wheel that's set up for trimming is great when you are trimming pots that are perfectly round. Inevitably the bottom of your pot, when we cut it off the wheel, is going to have just kind of this nasty bottom that you trimmed roughly when you were done throwing it. So we want to clean that up, give it a nice, what we call a foot. So you'll have a raised ring at the bottom so that the middle part of it doesn't sit on the table or whatever surface you'll have it on. So for round pots, you can still do them on the wheel. It's just lining on your wheel sitting down, it's just lining them up. But sometimes these are easier to do on the standing wheel. If you alter the shape of your pot, so like these cups are square on the top, these are not going to be easy to trim on the standing wheel. So we're going to do these when we are sitting at our regular wheel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to recenter this upside down. So before I put it on the wheel, I'm going to check my depth, kind of see how thick the bottom of my pot is. I know I have a lot of clay right in here. The bottom is got a decent amount of thickness, but I'm not going to take a whole lot out of there. But it's really thick right here. So I'm going to give this a nice kind of foot ring around here, incorporate this side, and then I'm going to create a transition from the squared side to the round foot. When I do this, I want to place it as close to the center as possible. You'll see rings on the surface of the wheel head. That is to help you kind of line things up and center them. If you look directly straight down at it, you'll be able to kind of see how this round bottom can line up with these. So once you've done that, what I'm going to do is turn my wheel on slowly, and using my finger, I'm just going to set it until the pot touches my finger. Okay, so it's touching it there, but not there. So what I need to do is I need to adjust it. So I'm going to take it where it's touching my finger, and I'm just going to slightly slide it away from there. And that's good, that's centered. So I'm using the round part to make sure it's centered, not the squared off part. Then I'm going to take some clay just some excess clay that I had that's a little bit drier. It's a little bit stiffer than the clay you throw with. And I'm just going to make small little lugs like this. And holding the top of my pot so it doesn't slide, I'm going to press them down so it keeps my pot from sliding. And I'm going to put 3 or 4 of these on here. And these are going to help hold my pot in place when I begin to trim. When you're trimming your pots, you want to make sure that they're leather hard, so that when I do this part of it, I'm not denting the pot, and it makes it easy to trim the bottom. If it's too soft, you'll dent your pot while you're trimming it, or the trimming tool can get sucked into it by the clay, and you'll end up trimming more than you want to. So when you go to start to trim, I'm going to hold my trimming tool. I'm going to use my smaller loop tool and ribbon tools. So I'm going to use this smaller one that's got the 2 ends, one with the squared off end, one with the round end. And one hand on my pot, one hand firmly holding my tool, I'm going to start to clean away some of these edges. And if your pot is the right dryness, it should come off in ribbons like this. If it's too wet, it'll kind of gunk up and stick on the trimming tool. If it's too dry, it'll just come off in shavings. You want to avoid trimming when it's too dry, because those shavings create a lot of dust, and the last thing we want to do is add more dust to the room. So the foot of your pot should complement the overall shape of your pot. So as I create my transition from round to square, I'm just going to create a rounded edge on the bottom. So now that I've created the outside of the foot, it's time for me to work on this inner part. So I'm going to even up my side of my foot. And then I'm going to start to take off that little bit of clay that popped up. And now when I work to create my foot, the first thing I want to do is mark where my foot is going to be. So this part out here will actually be the part that touches the tabletop or wherever you're setting it down. And this middle part I can take more out of. So that that is raised and up off the table. I usually work from the inside out. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of judge depth. Plus your outer edge can be a little bit deeper than the middle part because this is closer to the wall where you had all that extra thickness. I'm just going to make my foot a little bit narrower. And like that. At some point you will probably trim through the bottom of one of your pots, and that's okay. Everybody does it at some point. Just know that when you do that, it's easier to make a new one than it is to try and fix that hole at the bottom. So if you try and fix that hole, it never really is quite the same. I'll make sure I clear all the trimmings and stuff out. And then using the long edge of my flat end, I'm just gonna make sure the bottom is even, so that it sits flat on whatever surface I'm going to have it on. And I'm just going to round my edge a little bit on the outside. Now the last thing I want to do is, because I've been trimming with it leather hard, there's what we call grog in the clay, and grog is thicker sand particles, so it leaves all these scratches on the surface. And the last thing I want to do is I want to get rid of those. So I'm just going to take a sponge, and it's damp, it doesn't have a lot of water in it. I'm going to run it over the surface just to wet the surface. Then I'm just going to use my finger to cover up and seal up those scratches that we made while we were trimming. Eventually we'll sand the bottom of the rim to make it smooth so that it doesn't scratch any surfaces. And we'll do that with just a little bit of sandpaper, but that would be after it's been fired. And that is the trimmed bottom. So then I can take these lugs that I put on there and I can just peel them off. And I can use them again if I have another square pot that I want to trim. So then this is ready for a handle.